All right, everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Honest Defense. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Avery Dellinger. He is the general manager of Helium Comedy Club in Indianapolis. It is perhaps my favorite comedy club in the country. It's a great facility. They've had incredible comedians come through here. I've performed here a number of times. Avery, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you, sir.
So I want to start with how you got into comedy, because you've been managing clubs for a really long time. Let's go to the very beginning. When did you first get interested in comedy in general?
I would watch A&E's Evening at the Improv and Caroline's Comedy Hour. It was just all on TV. Yeah. I was too young to go to a club, and my mom would go out frequently to the local comedy clubs, and she would come back and say, "Oh, I saw this guy last week," and I just wanted to see these people. And when I became 18, I went into the club for the first time in Broad Ripple, and it was amazing that the comics did the same set both shows. I'd went to see a comic twice in a row because I was so excited to see it for real life, and it was disappointing to see that it was something different both shows. I'm like, or it was the same. I thought that this was all coming off the top of people's heads.
Right.
That it was just, I'm a funny person and I'm going to be funny on stage and roll with that. I didn't realize it was a set until that time. But then I was intrigued at how you make it sound like it's something completely off the cuff, but it's been honed so finely that. Yep. That it works that way, and you can make anybody laugh with it in this particular order, as opposed to you having a joke with your friends at the water cooler. It doesn't work the same as when you tell somebody that has no idea what you're talking about, that the water cooler people don't know. So that's what interested me in the first place.
It's so funny. Stand-up is when you get into it, you realize, oh, this is a lot harder than it looks. It isn't. Yeah. It's so much different than just making your friends laugh out at a bar. Being able to stand on stage and make strangers laugh, and to do it in a way where, it's carefully planned, but you have to not make it look carefully planned. I think there's so much science that goes into it. That right, exactly.
Smoke and mirrors.
Exactly. And the other thing too, when I ask people how they got interested in comedy, it's funny how many people. Because you would think comedy's so rebellious, but so many people say, well, my parents were really into this or that, and that's how. So it's funny to hear you say that, because I was the same way, where my parents really were into SNL. So they had VHS tapes of all the old SNL shows that we just had stacks of them at home. So I was watching John Belushi and Gilda Radner and Chevy Chase and all of those guys when I was 9, just because that's what my parents were into. And I think that was my foot in the door.
I also remember my sister would take me to a babysitting house she had, and they had Eddie Murphy Delirious.
Okay.
And we would go over there, and every time we would watch Eddie Murphy Delirious. And I was so young that I should not have been watching it at the time. But that was probably my first introduction to comedy.
That's what,
and then that turned into comedy clubs on TV. So
I got introduced to Eddie Murphy a little too early too, and again, it goes to my mom. She took us to see The Nutty Professor when I was maybe, again, I don't know when it came out, 11, and it sounded like I think she thought it was just gonna be this fun, goofy movie, and there was a lot of dirty parts in that movie that people maybe don't remember. But so Eddie Murphy was an early one for me too. Oh, that's great. So how did you go from being a comedy fan to really being in the business of comedy?
Well, my sister, again, started working at the Broad Ripple Comedy Club as a server. It was called the Broad Ripple Comedy Club at the time. It was,
and just we have a lot of non-Indianapolis listeners, so for the non-Indy people, Broad Ripple's just a neighborhood. It's kind of a hip neighborhood in Indy.
Yeah, it's got bars and an entertainment district of the north side of Indianapolis, and she started working there, and I came back from college and needed a job, and I thought that would be a great place to get my foot in the door as well. They needed servers, and I tried my hand at serving. I was not 21 yet, so I hadn't even drank alcohol, but I was a cocktail server for the Broad Ripple Comedy Club. And it was interesting. You would see some famous people. They weren't They weren't the Eddie Murphys of the day, but they were the best comics that toured at the time coming through, and they would buddy up with you, and that was totally different from the UPS job that I had at the same time, and it was just it was exciting to go to work. It wasn't work. It was going in and having fun and then making money at the same time. And I went from serving to bartending, and then my sister became a manager when the comedy club sold to Crackers. And when she needed days off, she trusted me to cover days off. So then I became an assistant manager, and then I decided comedy was going to be it for a while. I was wanting to. I went to school for art, and so I had an opportunity to work in the art field, and I was gallery represented by a gallery in Fountain Square, Indiana, and I thought, I don't need to be working in the comedy club all the time. I can still go see shows, and I'll start working with art stuff. And right after that, 9/11 had hit, and the art world that I was working at was float building. I helped to build parade floats, and people didn't want to have parades for a couple years, so I got laid off from that job. And then I had a buddy of mine that still worked at the comedy club as a bartender that had decided they were going to start a new club up on the north side of Indianapolis called, well, at the time we didn't know where we were going to start it, but we were going to start a new club, Morty's Comedy Joint. And so he asked if I would come along to be a manager there, and I missed it.
Yeah.
So it's been in it ever since. There was Morty's, and then they closed down in 2018, I think. And then Helium opened up in 2019, and I came here.
What was it like being in comedy right after 9/11? And was there a period where you felt like, or where comedians or where the audience felt like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be laughing at things? Like, what was that kind of feeling like in the weeks after 9/11?
I think everybody needed comedy, and me being in the world, I'm not offended as much as other people are, I'd say. But there was a few times when people would push the subject just to bring it up. Comedy is a way to talk through your issues and your problems and your thoughts, and to get it out there and make it manageable as opposed to having it eat you up. You know, that's what gets me about people being upset about a rape joke or something that's controversial. I'm like, they're doing it to talk it out and not make it hurt so much.
Right.
So we understand that you're upset too, but that's why comedy is there. Anywho, people would bring it up, and it was kind of risky.
Yeah.
It took a little while. Some people jumped right back on, and it took a little while, but it worked out.
And that's the beauty of clubs. And that's why I get so mad when you see like recordings from clubs get leaked out, because the clubs are where you're coming in to work out this stuff and to talk about these ideas and to see how people are going to react. It's to me, it is, I never liked the word safe space, but it is really a safe space to test out these ideas. And so, I would think, right after 9/11, you're, as a comedian, you're like, okay, what can I say? What can't I say? Where can I push that line? And you need that you need to know that, okay, I can test things out here, and people aren't going to go and back then the internet wasn't as big, but people aren't going to go and take video and put it on the internet.
Yeah, I think I can't remember his name. There was I will bring it up at another time when it comes to me.
Sure.
Comedy didn't get leaked too often until
iPhones.
That probably was part of it. There was people stealing jokes and being recorded doing the joke, and then they were comparing it to albums and stuff. And
right.
That's when it really kind of started being a, hey, watch who's watching stuff on their phones or whatever during a show.
Right.
But I can't remember that dude's name.
I remember Carlos Mencia and Joe Rogan. That was the big one. But even before that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anywho.
That's all right. So Helium opened right around the time that I moved to Indy. I moved in early 2019. What was the comedy scene like before Helium? Were you guys able to get, because here at Helium, you're connected to the Helium network. There's a number of clubs. They're based in Philly, but I think there's 5 or 6 Helium clubs now. And so you're kind of able to get plugged into that network and get the big names that are touring at other Helium clubs. But when you were at Morty's and Crackers, were you still able to get the same type of acts coming through? Was there, an anchor club in Indy the way Helium feels like this is the number one club in Indy, clearly. This is where if you're a big touring comedian, you're going to clubs, this would be the place to go to. You guys have gotten, Dave Attell and Adam Carolla and Ari Shaffir. All of the big club acts come here. Were the other clubs like that before Helium, or was there just not one club like that?
They would get some big acts. Helium gets more household name acts per capita than any of the other clubs I've worked at has, but we would still get them. It just would be fewer and far between. A lot of them have contracts where a smaller club may not be able to meet their demands to seat capacities and stuff. I remember at Morty's, the Schaumburg, Illinois Improv was able to get Dave Attell when we were trying to get him because they could seat over 400 and we only had like 350. And so that really confused me when the Comedy Attic in Bloomington, which is a smaller room, was able to get some of these bigger acts with a 100-seat room or whatever it is down there, 125. So that kind of threw my logic off as to why they weren't coming to our clubs. But we did get them here and there. We had Dave Attell at Crackers, at Morty's. There was the Funny Bone that was where Morty's currently or started back up at, and they had him there. I bartended for them for that show. So we would get the bigger names. It just was a lot less frequently.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was more legwork on your part because you were an independent club, right? Did you have to do a lot more of the work on your own to get those names?
We would have bookers that would try to get them, but we would definitely try to get certain people, check to see who was going to surrounding areas and see if we could tie in a date. And then we just hoped our reputation would precede us and people would be like, they're a good club, they treat the comics well. And that's everywhere I've worked recently has been a place that tries to treat the comics well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big proponent.
Yeah, well, you hear comics talk about that all the time. They talk about that who manages the club's a big deal, and they will refuse to not go to clubs if it's bad management. And a lot of them will talk about how there are a lot of managers who they run a club just because they want to be in business, or their parents ran the club, so now they're running the club. It's more of a business to them, and they're not comedy fans first. And obviously, you're a comedy fan. How much of a big deal do you think that is, that the manager is also a fan and not just in it to run a business?
Well, I don't see many other clubs than the ones I work at.
Okay.
However, I hear the stories, and I think it's a good and a bad thing. It's good because you treat the comedy like it should be treated. It's bad because I do it no matter what, right. Even though if it's... well, you were coming to our open mic nights. I mean, you would be there at every single open mic night, and I've been to a few other clubs, and I've never seen a manager do that, and I have to assume that there's not many out there who would do that, to take a Wednesday night and just hang out for a couple hours. That's
to hear
the
a bunch
stuff
of
I remember
idiots.
from when I worked not in management, when I was palling around with the little open micers that were running around Crackers or early Morty's. I would see that they would be upset because they drove here from Dayton to do a guest spot and the manager didn't even see them. Right. And I'd be like, well, I'll be that guy that sees them. I want to make sure that I'm not the one that they're talking bad about, that I give them the opportunity if they're going to come in here. I don't often see people bringing it like they should. Right. They often come up and screw around on the stage. But every once in a while you'll see somebody that really has it together. And it might take you seeing them a few times before it kicks as that guy's got something or that girl's got something, or I really like that joke and he's been working on it but he hasn't gotten it, and then finally it clicks, and then hey, he really worked on it, as opposed to just coming back and either trying something completely different every time, but that that's not the best way, in my opinion, based on me seeing comics do the same set over and over. You have to really define an idea to its essence to get the laughter out. Too much additives to a joke just destroys it. And my business partner at Morty's would call me the comedy connoisseur, because I have no desire to be up on stage and
I was going to ask you. Yeah, have you ever done it?
I have.
Okay.
Not legit. I did improv with some people. I've never like written a set to take up there. I've done roasts where I've had to write some stuff, and I'm that's not my my desire at all.
Sure.
But I do like to figure a joke out and why did it work this time but not that time, and it's the same audience for the most part, size and demographic, and this audience got everything and this audience didn't, and why? What was different about that set than this set? And is it just sometimes it's the first few words out of the person's mouth puts the audience off and they turn on them, and other times they just like smile differently and everybody's like, oh, this guy's fun, and they give him the benefit of the doubt, and then they have a great show. So all that stuff adds in to why something works or not, and that's the fun of this job, is to try to figure it out. Whether I will ever use it, no, and I'll give people advice if they ask for it. Sometimes I'll kind of slide it to them if I think that it's somebody I trust enough that doesn't think I'm just being an asshole trying to dictate their comedy sets. But
you have to have thick skin if you're going to perform, because you need that objective feedback to know whether something's going well or not. And you want, when I'm doing something, I want to hear as much as I can from the people who know comedy, because they can tell me, hey, I've seen this type of joke before, I've seen people move this way before, and this is how to make it funnier. Like, why wouldn't I want that as a comic, to have someone who's been around this for decades?
But I can't tell you. I can just tell you whatever this is that you're doing is not working because of this. I can tell you that. Right. And if you tried something different, it might work. Right. But I can't tell you what will make it funny. That's just not in me yet.
Right. And for a lot of, I think for a lot of, especially at open mic, you see a lot of people. I've seen people have really good material, but they're just nervous, and a lot of it's just getting that experience. Mm-hmm. And then you see some people who have a lot of confidence and no material, and that's where there's trouble. It's okay. You really got to work on your material. You've got great stage presence, but actually writing the jokes is the hard part.
There are a lot of comics that have gotten very far in comedy based on their ability to market themselves and their outgoingness, and they are not funny at all.
Right.
And if the funny people could learn some of that, it would get them farther.
Right. And I guess, ultimately it's like you're trying to entertain people. So if you have a lot of confidence and you have a great stage presence and you're not funny, but people are paying to see you, I guess you're doing your job. It might not be a show I want to see, but if other people are seeing it, you're doing something. Yeah.
Entertaining and just being up there addressing the crowd is a big part of it. Yeah. And whether the joke is funny, that's an additive.
Right.
You have to be a fun person, I guess. There are even unfun comics that the comedy works, so I can't say that.
Right, whatever works, works. There's been a lot of talk about cancel culture. That's kind of everywhere, but especially in comedy, about people seem to be getting more easily offended, or not even more easily offended. It's that people more want to shame people who are offensive or who they find offensive. Have you seen that at all here? Has that affected anything you do, or any of your work, or any of the acts that you've had come through?
It has. There's been a comic that had allegations posed against them, and the club still decided to have the comic here, and a bunch of comics that would have continued to work here have protested the place, and so they're not going to work here because of it, and that's affected us. Like, I would like to have those comics in. I don't make the decisions of who gets booked here headliner wise. I can give my recommendations, but ultimately that's not my decision. And so if people are unhappy with who the comedy club books, and they protest us, then I don't want to demean their
Right.
opinions, but I also
Well,
feel bad that I don't get to work with them again.
right. But I mean, and that's the right way to go about it. I think if you're not comfortable with a comic at this club and you don't want to perform at this club, then fine, don't perform. I think where it gets ugly is when they try to get other people to start boycotting the club, or they post, you see people post like really ugly things online about so-and-so said this or that. Like there's a dark side to it. I get if you're not comfortable coming here because someone else was here. I wouldn't do that. I respect the fact that this is a venue for different people to come through, and if there's a particular person I don't like, that I won't see that person. But if you want to boycott the entire club, fine. But have you seen, like, when you say that they protested the club, were they physically outside protesting? Or was it just them saying?
I've not had any physical protesters. Okay. It's mostly been online protesting.
Okay.
I've been worried about physical protesters on a few comics that has not turned out to be the case, but I've been worried about that. Yeah, and we're pushing the envelope with comedy, right. So that's part of the game too. I'm not just putting in the most household names that aren't going to offend. Right. The ones that they're booking are ones that are pushing comedy to different areas that would have kept us from having a Lenny Bruce, like we mentioned earlier, or tons of comics that just aren't conventional.
Right.
And that's what comedy is.
Right.
And it changes your thought process on things. Yeah. When you come to see a comedy show and they talk about something that you can relate to, it hits hard.
Yeah.
And when you can take something that you thought you were thinking about it, and they've spun it in a way that that puts it in a different perspective to you, that's why the comedy is here. And some people just don't ever see that other side, and then they get offended. There was a guy recently, a comic had made a joke about Black Lives Matter, stuff about how cops were killing black people. And a gentleman in the audience was offended by it and was threatening to I guess, hurt the comic.
Was this in the
social media?
In the middle of the act or after the show?
We removed him from the show, and then he posted online, hey, everybody come down here and do this. So the irony is that the joke was to bring attention to the fact that police were killing black people. It was not an anti-black joke.
Right.
And he just took it that way because he didn't get the joke. Right. And anyhow, it's here to talk about it and bring it into people's consciousness so that they can work through it, and it's not a problem anymore. That's the big goal, I think.
Right.
So.
Well, and that's, I saw one of my favorite shows I saw here was Ari Shaffir, and he did a whole hour about Judaism. He grew up Jewish and went to yeshiva school. And my family's from the East Coast, and I'm Jewish on my mother's side, and you're around a lot of Jewish people there. But in Indiana, you don't have a big Jewish population. And so it was fun to see Ari talk about all the stuff about Judaism and get people who might not be exposed to that culture learning about it because it was an educational set that he did, and it was funny all the way through. I think he's one of the best working comics today. But it is this double layer with comedy. That's how you teach people things, like Lenny Bruce. We talked about that before we started recording, and I did a great episode with Lenny Bruce, with two lawyers who wrote a book on Lenny Bruce, and Lenny's whole thing was about exposing the hypocrisy of society, the hypocrisy of the church and of the police. And back in the early 60s, you weren't allowed to talk about that stuff on stage, but now it's become something that we can have a conversation about. And it started with Lenny Bruce talking about it on stage and later getting arrested for it.
Yeah.
And so we're lucky now that at least you don't have to worry about that. But I think the big thing that comics have to worry about now is it's not the police, it's not getting arrested, but it's about people posting them stuff, doxing their personal lives online, in cancel culture. Yeah. And it's tough. I want to fast forward to what it's been like managing the club this year, because again, it was such a fun place. This has been my favorite place to be in Indiana. I mean, I remember one show we did and this was probably late 2019. I was performing in a show upstairs. Bob Saget was performing down here in the main room, and it was the most fun night I've had since I moved to Indiana. It was just the house was packed. It was packed upstairs for us, a bunch of nobodies. Obviously, it was packed for Bob Saget. The bars were full. It was just an exciting time. I was so glad this place was here. It was I'll never forget that night. And then obviously you fast forward to just a couple months later, and COVID hit. So I wanted to hear what that experience was like for you. When did you first kind of realize we're going to have to probably shut this whole place down?
We had comedian Jamie Lee scheduled to come in. I took her to the morning press, and she's telling me that there was nobody on the flight coming out here, and that
was this like mid-March, early March?
It was, I think,
the
12th of March, maybe.
Okay.
And it was before St. Patrick's Day. I remember that because I had already placed an order for a whole bunch of Irish beer. But she was telling me how she was worried that we were going to cancel the show on her because of, March Madness was in town as well. And there was a ton of people in town. And I'm like, there's no way that we're going to cancel the show. And we did the morning news. I took her back to her hotel, and then I got a text from my higher-ups saying that Jamie was canceling the show. And I was like, I just talked to her, and she said she wasn't. Well, her agent was telling her to cancel the show because of just how things had gotten. And so we ended up canceling the show, and we shut down, I think, all of our clubs that particular weekend. And it was a scary time for all my staff that didn't know where things were going to go, and a lot of them didn't think that it was a thing. They're like, oh, well, this is just a news story that's going to pass and we'll be open next weekend or something like that. And they didn't understand the gravity of, hey, we're going to be laying people off and you need to go and apply for unemployment right now because we don't know when we're going to reopen. And I had all this produce that I just ordered in, and I ended up divvying it up amongst the staff that came in and needed it. And we did a GoFundMe for our staff, and we were closed for about 3 months. The club tried to get people working through doing like online scouting out different places we could do comedy shows and just different things to give them something to do.
Right.
At some point, they ran out of work for me too, and so I got laid off for a little bit. And once the protocols were in place that everything could be reopened, we reopened with social distancing. We have spray that we spray on all of our stuff that sanitizes it, and we leave it there for 5 minutes, I think it is, and disinfects everything. We put up plexiglass on our box office and our in our bar area to separate our bartender from our servers. We have one at our podium, so when people are checking in, they can all be safe in that regard. And we went to all disposable food products, or the dishes and everything is all disposable, so nobody's bringing back anyone else's germs, I guess, and handling it at the dishwashers. We made all of our food where it's either fried or baked, and there's no hands-on. It's just coming right out of a fryer into a basket that gets sent out, or actually it's a to-go box. So I think that has helped keep us in the safe so far. We haven't had any notification that we've caused anyone to be ill by coming into our establishment. Some of our clubs have reopened here and there. We reopened back in June for Big J Okerson.
I was at that show, and It went fine. It's weird, having to check in and wear the mask and do, do all the hand sanitizer and do the temperature check. But it was a great show. Jay did a great job. And the only thing different was the tables are more separated. You can't fit as many people. But the show went really well.
Yeah, we had to do half capacity. There's some clubs that haven't reopened at all since, like our Buffalo club has been closed since March. Anywho, once we got people coming back in, the first few weeks, maybe a month, it was a lot of people that were coming out, and they were all in the best spirits because they'd been stuck at home for a long time. They were drinking well and eating well, and they weren't heckling. They were a good crowd.
Yeah.
And then about October through November-ish, it was a lot more. People were not as cautious. They were, you tell them to wear a mask and they put it on top of their head, across the top, as opposed to over their face, that kind of stuff. And a lot more people getting too drunk, getting a little rowdy.
More so than before. It was a lot of that pent up.
I think they were all on their best behavior for that first couple months, and then they're like, screw this, I'm needing to get out of the house and I don't care what happens, you know? But I'd say about December it's kind of been better. Everything's we have more like control over the shows, I think, at this point. But for a while there, it was getting a little weird.
Did you get a lot of pushback when you first opened? Because I think you guys, out of all the performing centers, shows, I think you were really the first in the city to open. I went to that first Big J show, and that was the first time I left the house, really. Did you get any pushback from either the city or just from the general public about opening so early?
No, there were other venues that were surprised that we were able to be open, and they weren't. And we had a restaurant license that allowed us to be open while a bar license wasn't being honored, I guess. I don't know how it worked, but the owners were in like daily contact with the mayor action line or whatever here in Indianapolis. So I didn't actually get pushback from guests or any other businesses, but there were other businesses that I have friends that work at say, how are you guys able to be open and we're not? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
So, then there was an instance where some of our comics didn't want to wear masks. They were the ones that were out touring because they weren't afraid of anything, and it would bring out their clientele that also didn't think that masks were a thing. So for a while there, it was a little uncomfortable. And I didn't particularly like that portion of the COVID time, but once we just started making sure that people were more vigilant about what they were supposed to be doing. There was a venue in Indianapolis that had a picture circulated of a whole bunch of people at a speedrome that was full of people, and they got shut down. And I thought, I can't have that happen to us. So I just made sure that if there was somebody that wore the mask on top of their head, we just kicked them out.
Right.
Get out of here.
You got to play it safe.
You're not the one that's going to shut me down. So that's what happened.
Are you in touch with any of the local comics? That 'cause that's what I'm worried about with all of this, is that so many venues have been closed and so many mics, especially the open mics and the smaller shows, just have been closed down and maybe permanently. I don't know what happens to kind of the next generation of comics who won't be able to get that same kind of experience that they were able to get before the pandemic. Do you have your finger on that at all, about what it's been like for the local comics?
I know they're all eager to get on stage again. We had the open mic going for a little while, and I had one particular week where I choose, I think 15, it might be 20, I can't remember at this point. It's been a while since we've had one.
Right.
I choose a certain amount of people online that have submitted to be on the open mic in advance, and I let them know, hey, you guys have been chosen, and they have to respond, hey, I'd like to be on the show. And I had all these people that responded yes, but then the day of, 6 of them had a specific reason, very specific reason that made me think that it wasn't
Okay.
as specific reason why they couldn't make the show. And I had just a little scare that maybe they might have had COVID and they didn't want to tell me, because if in a week from now I need them for an MC spot, that I wouldn't call them. I don't know why.
Right.
But it shook me a little bit that I had that many people that had agreed to do it on a Monday, and now it's Wednesday and they've canceled on me. And cases were spiking, and so I was like, I'm just going to cut off the open mic for a little while.
Right.
It's not benefiting the club because
Right.
we weren't making money on it. It's just for the comics to get stage time and my employees to have another day that they can work.
Yep.
But I really didn't know how long the club was going to stay open, so I just wanted to make sure that we did everything we could to stay safe so that we didn't get shut down.
Right. Because then there's never going to be an open mic again, if the club ends up getting shut down.
Yeah. And the people initially were very vigilant about putting the mic condoms on and spraying down the microphones, and then as time went on, people would forget, and it got more sloppy up on stage, and that was one of the reasons why I was afraid to have an open mic, is how many people were sharing the same stage, and we began using multiple mics right off the bat, but still people weren't going to the alternate mic, and they weren't getting it. And so I called it quits for the time being. It's the cases are lowering, and I'm expecting to bring it back here soon, but I don't know when.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's soon, because again, pre-COVID, there'd be over 20 people on the list, and there'd be a bunch of people on the waiting list when to get on. I mean, and it was, again, it's a relatively new club, so it felt like at the end of 2019, we were just starting to get crowds coming for the open mic. You're just starting to get people, like, it was just getting there, and COVID just hit at such a horrible time for the club. And it just, and I'm everyone's gone through a tough situation because of COVID, so I don't need to harp on that. But it was a tough time when that first hit. You brought up hecklers, and I guess I want to bring the conversation back to that, because I'm still trying to get an idea of how different comedy is now. In terms of like the sensitivity, in terms of hecklers, whether they're heckling because they're offended by something, or just because it feels like sometimes hecklers just want to be involved in the show, like they just want the attention. Do you see more of that these days than you did maybe when you first got into comedy, or even 10, 15 years ago? Do you notice any kind of change in the crowds, the type of crowds from the past?
Not really. There's always the shows that have a person that had too much to drink,
right,
and they think that they're helping the show, and I'm just being part of the show. I'm just laughing. No, you're not laughing. You're disrupting the show,
right.
And so that's always been a thing. I think it's an Indianapolis thing, possibly, because I hear about it at other, like I would say in Boston. I think they probably have people in the audience that may not be as willing to let a joke go if it's not going okay. And I think here they're just a nicer demographic when they come to a comedy show. They're not wanting to belittle the comic. If a joke doesn't well, they might roll their eyes or not laugh, but they're not going to boo. And I've seen other places that have had that.
Oh, that's funny.
But I've not been there because I work here.
Right. I hadn't thought of it as a regional thing, but I think you're right that people in the middle, I mean, I came from the East Coast. I just know people generally, and it is just a nicer type of person that's out here in the Midwest. So that makes sense that it would translate to the clubs.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that's all I have on that one.
There's always stories about comedians, especially the big headliners, having weird requests about things or just weird tendencies. Have you had to deal with any headliners being especially difficult?
Yes.
You don't have to name names.
Yes, but I've had some difficult headliners that it was it's disheartening to see somebody that you somewhat, I wouldn't say I idolize them, but I've looked up to these people, and then to have them treat a show or my staff or me like we're not people, that's insulting.
Yeah.
But
that's always such a weird thing for me, because when you see someone who maybe grew up wealthy and literally just never had to live a normal life, then it doesn't excuse that kind of behavior, but you're like, okay, I can see why, you just don't understand what normal people are like. But for a comedian, pretty much every comedian started from nothing. So do you not remember what it was like, 20 years ago?
I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah.
I think they get taught a different way to react.
Yeah.
They're allowed to do it other places because, they're whoever. And when I'm not expecting that on a daily basis from them, and then I see them once a year and that's how they're acting, it's off-putting.
Yeah.
Somebody was very famous and suggested that we needed better security for them. And I was like, there's nobody going to come back and bother you. What do you need? And they said, well, you're not me. You don't know that. And so at one point, I'm taking them out to their waiting car, and it hadn't dawned on me how famous this person is. And when people saw them that were just walking down the street, they just flocked to them. And I was like, okay, maybe I was in the wrong. You do need extra security.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm not right in my assessment of their rudeness, but they're just stating a fact in a very matter-of-factly way, and it came off as rude.
Yeah.
But there are some other ones that are a little on the rude side, just to be that way, I guess.
And I guess you have to write that off as part of the job. It's they're bringing in the crowds, and so you just got to accept it to, I guess, a certain extent.
It's how much rudeness am I going to take from you versus how much are you bringing into the club?
Right, exactly.
It's all, if they're doing great and bringing in crowds, by all means, you're going to be as rude as you
you
want to.
earned it, I guess.
As soon as those numbers start to dip, dude, I'm going to...
Right. Well, that's I think that's probably why you see so many guys who are at the very top and then very quickly also fall off, because if you're an asshole, okay, you can be an asshole for a while you're really at the top, but then once you start to dip a little bit, then people are waiting for you to just collapse, and so they'll write you off immediately. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Don't burn any bridges.
Yeah.
Because you're not always going to be riding high.
Yeah. One of the things you do is, if a lot of times headliners might bring their own opening act with them, but a lot of times they'll also just ask the club to supply kind of a local opening act. How do you go about choosing who, if a headliner says, hey, I want a local guy to open for me, how do you go about choosing that person?
I try to watch every open mic.
Yeah.
I want to know who's doing what, and if they are hungry, if they're doing the work, that's who I'm looking at. It's the person that's making that slight change in their joke, that's they're just, you can see it in their work if they're doing it. And other people, they just wait every Wednesday to come and say the same joke with no added anything, and then take up stage time from somebody that actually could be working on something. So it's a love-hate relationship on that. I want to see them doing something that's changing for the better, as opposed to, and it doesn't even have to get better. Just as long as I know they're trying to figure out how to make it better.
Right.
That's what I like to see. When somebody comes in and they try to do just their best stuff for me, I'm not looking for that.
Yeah.
I'm looking for, what's that thing that you're trying. I know what, if the audience laughs or not. I know what's funny and what's not in this regard. And if you're saying a funny premise and you just haven't got it worked out, I know. And so I can give you the benefit of the doubt. It's just the ones that are saying the same joke that 20 other comics have done about how they got high, or they, or this is my job, I'm a comic. Okay, everybody's job is a comic that works here. So tell me something different.
Right.
And when they do that, then I will, they'll be on my radar. And I get a list of comics that are expecting to have us book for them, and I try to think of what kind of comic that I have to pair up with them.
Interesting.
So I don't want to put the same style of comedy on with the same headliner. So if a headliner's high energy, I don't want to have a super high energy feature act, because that's taxing on an audience. So I'll make it a medium energy. I don't want to have a low energy comic, because then it's too
interesting.
distracting.
Yeah.
but I could put like a really high energy MC, a middle energy feature to go with a high energy headliner.
Yeah.
Or just that's one example. But
Right.
What I find difficult is if it's a comic that I haven't heard of and I don't know their comedy that I have to pair up somebody with, then I have to research myself and find out what that comic's all about and watch as much as I can online for them or ask people that I trust.
Yeah.
Like, who would work well with this person, because I don't know who they are.
Right. That's interesting.
But
so you're basing it almost all on what you're seeing on open mics. It's not like you're going to other clubs and seeing what they're doing, but you can tell, on those Wednesday night open mic nights, you can tell just, okay, I saw this person here last week. I can tell they've in that week they've been working on this at other places.
I watch the open mics. I also have I do go to some of the local shows.
Okay.
I don't go out of state, but I'll go to the local shows to see who's doing what, and I try not to like make myself known that I'm there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people get nervous around me for some reason. I don't know why. Because I've never went up and said you suck or anything like that. But
it's the position you're in more than you itself.
Yeah.
They know you're that gatekeeper for them.
Yeah. And I don't want to make them nervous or throw them off. And I want to like just catch, hey, is this guy doing good stuff outside of the club? There was one comic that I saw at a the open mic at a hostel in Broad Ripple. I can't remember the name of the mic, but I saw this person and they did a really good set, and it was a lot longer than the sets I give them here because I'm trying to fit so many people in. They usually have 3 to 5 minute sets here. This was more like a 10-minute set at the other open mic, and just because I wasn't there maybe in their mind, they were freer with how they talked, and it went well, and I ended up using them for a gig. About a month later, I just thought, I'll try that guy out, and he did okay.
Yeah.
I also get submissions online. People email their submissions, and I don't watch all of them, and I like the whole set. I'll watch about 3 minutes of it right off the bat. So if anybody's ever sending out stuff, make sure that the funny stuff's in the beginning. don't do crowd work right at the beginning. Right. And how's everybody doing? If you're submitting a tape, get to the juice of it. They don't have 20 minutes to watch your set, and then other people as well. So that would be my advice for that. And then after I see a set that I like, I'll reach out to them, usually on Facebook. That's I can usually find more of their stuff. And then I'll either befriend them or send them an instant message on Facebook to kind of get a dialogue going, and then have them send me more if I need to see what else they have. I'll ask them how much time they've got, because a guest spot at a club doesn't say that you're only doing 6 minutes or you've only got an MC work. You could be a headliner that's doing a guest spot, or if you've got 45 minutes, I'd like to know it. And I want people to always be honest with me. I would hate to say put somebody in as a feature spot that's needing to fill 30 minutes and they've only got 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Tell me you've only got 20 minutes. I'll give an extra 10. I'll put a heavier MC in front of you so you can do 20 minutes and it kills instead of 20 minutes and then the last 10 minutes are you.
Yeah, you're only hurting yourself.
Dick in your hand because you can't do it.
Right.
And the whole show gets messed up that way. There were a lot of people, pardon me, early on that would, as I was growing up through comedy, that were friends of mine that were comics, would say, yeah, I told him I had this, but I don't have this. And I'm like, don't do that. That's the exact opposite of what you need to do.
You're going to get exposed.
You undersell yourself. And kill that 20 minutes, and then they'll say, I'll give him 25 or whatever. You know? So...
Is there anyone you've seen who's come up through the open mics in Indy and has now started touring nationally?
Miss Pat.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah. There's been a lot of people, but she's.
What was she like early on in her career? Did you see her in those earlier years?
Yeah,
was she still the Miss Pat that she is today?
She was, as she called them, roach jokes. She did jokes that were your typical BET Comic View jokes. Just said loudly.
Yeah, right.
And they weren't honed or polished. They were still kind of funny. It's funny in how you say it. It's not funny in what you're saying, but it's funny how you say it. And then she would come off stage and just be bantering around and tell about her grandpa's funeral, that the kids were farting on the pews and smacking him. He doesn't look dead. And I was just rolling. I was like, you need to talk about your life. And the other manager, the co-owner, he didn't like Miss Pat, said she was ghetto. And so he didn't want her in the club. And I reached out to her and said, here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that was...
she's such a unique... I couldn't imagine. She's such a unique talent. Like she's so fundamentally funny in just her demeanor and who she is.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine just wanting to shut her down, because you're right, because she can just... You can have... I've had a couple conversations with her, and just when you're just talking to her one-on-one and she's not even trying to be funny, she has you howling.
Yeah.
Because that's just who she is.
The other... my business partner, I think he didn't like her because she was a black woman. He was a black man, and there was something about women I'm not.
He just thought
positive.
she was shedding.
She was a powerful black woman,
light,
and
or
it just kind of
yeah.
it just rubbed him the wrong way.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to give her the opportunities, but. Man,
But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, I grew up in a 99% white area, and so when I hear someone like Miss Pat tell her story and talk about her life, that opens up a whole different world to me that I never experienced. And now I get to see, oh, this is what life's like for a lot of people. And again, she does it in a way that can make you laugh and makes you think, oh, wow, I can't believe people actually live like that.
Yeah, and she also connects with people that are out of her demographic that you wouldn't think that had the same type of life she had growing up in a white middle class neighborhood. Like, I had the same problems.
Right.
It blends both ways. And I just felt like she was in the Richard Pryor vein, where she was telling about
exactly
horrible stuff in a funny way, and that was very appealing to me.
Yeah.
I thought this gal's got a lot going for her.
So what's it been like seeing her rise up now to...
It's great. She's got herself a BET comic sitcom coming up. BET Plus.
I remember she was in here when she was getting ready. She was flying out to LA, I think, the next week to go and pitch the show.
Yeah, she's recording in Atlanta right now. Cool. She's recorded 2 episodes, and they're gonna keep going. And she's not living in Indianapolis right now, doing all this. She took all of her family down there. And some comics to write for her. Deion Curry, here locally, is down there writing for her. So,
that's so cool.
Anyway,
yeah.
So I've seen some people that came through, and other people I've seen that were very funny and just dropped off the face of the earth. They decided they weren't going to try comedy anymore.
Yeah.
I would mention their names, but I don't want to make them feel bad. There's multiple people that are just hilarious. And then life gotten involved. They had a family, something. They needed to make more money and couldn't keep doing. And I understand, but man, I really wish they would get back into it, because there's a reason why they're funny in the first place. Now we've got plenty of comics that want to fill spaces, but. Yeah, there were some really funny people that stopped.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the other thing that the general fan probably doesn't realize, like just how long it takes to start making any kind of money in comedy. That's why you see a lot of the biggest comics are in their 40s and 50s, just because it took them that long to rise from open mics to a Netflix special. And people.
I just saw Jermaine Fowler. He had came through. I didn't see him. I saw him on an ad for this new Coming to America 2.
Okay.
And he was like 15 or 16 years old. He came through. He stayed on a guy named Reno Hype's couch to do an open mic at the first Morty's. He did a joke about McGruff the crime dog. I recorded it, had it on the internet for him. I'm just like, this guy has gone so far from where I first met him. Now he's on a show with Eddie Murphy. I'm like, this is crazy.
So cool.
So to see people that were just, there's so many people.
Yeah.
Hannibal Buress came through Morty's as an MC.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Did he grow up in Indy?
He's from Chicago.
Okay.
So he would take the megabus down, and initially we didn't put up MCs in any housing or condos or anything like that, and he'd agreed to come down and stayed in the green room. So he slept in the green room the weekend.
Wow.
I would come in the morning, and he'd be, or midday, and he'd be waking up from staying in the green room all night. And I felt so bad that he had to stay there in the green room. The next time we had him back, I was like, we're going to put him back as a feature. He's better than an MC.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, my business partner put out-of-town female MC in his room. I'm like, you made him stay in the green room the first time he was here, and then you make him share a room with somebody the next time. And he never came back and played for us. But he's gone on to do a lot of good, fun things.
Yeah, absolutely. Hannibal's great. Well, Avery, let's pitch the club. Who do you have coming in? I know Shane Gillis is coming next month. I'm really excited. He's one of my favorites. He's coming in March. Who else is coming up here?
Damon Wayans Jr. is coming in. Russell Peters is coming in. Let's see. There's quite a few.
Yeah. And Brad Williams, I know.
Brad Williams?
Yeah.
They
Got
just
a lot of
keep
big acts coming
adding them as. I don't know how far we have had talks with people, but they're not putting them on the calendar too far out because we're trying to make sure we don't have to cancel shows.
Sure. Does it seem like our comics starting to start touring again? The ones
a little bit more. The ones that have contracted COVID and gotten over it are out again now.
Yeah.
There's ones that have been doing it for all this time and just are doing well, and then there's other ones that have finally figured out that there's still some safe places out there, and we're gonna try it again.
Right.
But we're kind of getting back to some of the ones we've already had last year when we reopened.
Yeah. So if you're in Indy and you like comedy, Helium, it's a beautiful facility. They've done a great job at they're maintaining all the safety protocols. I can vouch for it. I've been here a few times since COVID hit. So come down to Helium Comedy Club in Indianapolis. Avery Dellinger, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks.